Hello, and welcome to this presentation slash GitHub repository that we have created here at Developer Relations. And this is just one of the many examples that tries to show you that you can use OCI and the new GenAI service in a variety of scenarios with your own specific use case. So this was one of the use cases that I decided, and I wanted to show that content summarization actually has a lot of value for a company or for an individual that are trying to improve their social media content pipelines. If you want to generate automatically some content for your website, this is a good way to go. So this project is basically a content extractor and a summarizer. So the first thing that we're doing is that we are going to obtain the 25 trending projects from GitHub at any point in time. So we go to this github.com/trending website where you can see the most popular repositories every day. It's gonna extract their readme.md files as well as the URLs for each one of them. And it's going to summarize the README files so that we get an understanding of the repository wouldn't be as popular as it is, right? So we are almost assured that 99% of the README files that we are going to process here are actually good content. So just to give you an overview of the large language model that goes behind it, you can actually choose between Cohere models or actually using Llama 2. So the prompt is going to be something like, and you can modify this, of course, generate a teaser summary for this markdown file, share an interesting insight to captivate attention. The extractiveness is a parameter that allows us to specify how much do we want to reuse the input in the summary. So a summary with a high extractiveness usually leans toward using sentences as is, verbatim, while the summaries with a low extractiveness tend to paraphrase more. The format, you can either specify if you want it in brackets or as a paragraph. The length is going to be long, and the temperature is by default 0.3, which means that it's going to be 30% creative in this case. You could actually look for something more robust around temperature 0 or something extremely imaginative around temperature 1. So to run this repository, you just have to install the requirements. So just for you to see what's going on inside the requirements file, we're using Scrapey as a web crawler. Cite GitHub if you want to extract some additional information like the description of the repo and some other stuff. NLTK for tokenization of the summary. So there are some cases in which we can exceed the length of the input on the data that we actually want to summarize for our large language model. So there are some ways that you can use NLTK to tokenize your, or actually count the number of tokens in your string so that you don't surpass the limit. And of course you will need OCI, the Python SDK in this case, because we're using the standard development kit for Python. You need to have OCI installed and pre-configured with a configuration file, as it says here. So you need the OCI SDK. Remember to install this, and then you will have to create a configuration file with this data, but by replacing your user OCID, your key fingerprint, you have to upload an OCI key into OCI to run it. So if you want to run this and you don't care about the code, and you actually want to see the implementation, you can just run everything by, first of all, creating a config.yaml file, which is going to hold sensitive information in your project. So you don't have to upload it to the GitHub repository. It stays local. Then make sure that you have your OCI config, as we have said. And then you just have to run this shell script, which we will go over now. So the shell script is going to create a conda environment with Python 3.10, activate it, install the requirements, and just start running the web crawlers with Scrapey to extract the data. And then we just have to call the main to run, generate all the summaries and the output files. So just to go quickly over what's actually going on in the code, just so you see that it is nothing crazy. You have this training spider, which, as we said, is going to go into github.com/training. It's actually going to return the path of that so that we can extract the name of the repo, which is the only thing that's actually going here, and it's actually outputting it into an output.txt file. And the info spider actually does something similar. It accesses the github.com slash whatever we extracted, and it extracts the description of the repository. And finally, we just have to go into main, and you will see that here what we are doing is just abstracting the Python scripts part. So Scrapey cannot be run inside a Python script, so we just have to run it before. That's why we created the shell script to run everything. And here we are just importing the main functions of each one of the files that we're going to invoke in Python. And the code is very simple. First of all, we just go into main and we run the list of repositories that we want to get the README information. So we just pre-process the string files for each one of them. We pass them to the model, and the summarizer actually does everything. So this is the large language model part. Only thing we're doing is importing OCI, importing our sensitive information through the config.yaml file. We are calling the inference service endpoint for GenAI. You have all the documentation in the README. We are creating a generative AI inference client so that we can call this endpoint with the proper authentication present in our config file. We are giving it some parameters, like we want a summarization model, not a generation model, not an embedding model, but a summarization model. We are giving our compartment ID to identify ourselves and against which compartment this endpoint call is going to be made. We select the cohere command summarization model. We give it our hyperparameters with a temperature of 25. And the only thing we do is just return the data. And that is the whole implementation of this proof of concept. So now if you want to actually see if this works, I'm going to activate my Conda environment in which I have already installed my requirements.txt, remember. So first of all, I'm going to run the training spider. And this actually gets all the information. Then as you can see, we can go and look at the outputs. See that these are the trending repos today. A lot of them. Search with Lepton, LLMs from scratch. So the next thing I do is to run the info spider. It will extract for each one of the trending repositories some information like the description. And then the last thing I have to do is just to run this main file to process the README files as well and run the summarizer on top of each one of the repos. So we will get 25 outputs for each one of the summaries of the README files. And this actually takes a little while because it has to go through all of them. And you see here that this is a whole README file, but in case that there are some maximum limit of tokens, then here is when the processing of the tokens is done, right before summarization. And now we can take a look at the outputs. So you see here that we have one output file for each one of the repositories. Search with Lepton is a tool that allows users to create conversational search engine. And you actually, let's see another one, output 3, for example. This is a little bigger, right? Data Engineering Zoom Camp is a self-paced online course offered by Data Talks Club, covering various topics in data engineering. So we see that it actually makes a lot of sense what's actually being written. The summarization is done correctly. And one of the good things is that actually you don't need a GPU or anything to run this locally. You can just make an HTTP request as a lot of developers and actually get this result in no time. We did 25 summarizations in about 3 or 4 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed this little use case that shows you how you can integrate generative AI into your content pipelines. You can actually reuse this in whichever form. This repository is in our Oracle DevRel repository, which has a UPL license. So you're free to reuse our code, contribute, and we'll see you in the next one. Just remember that this is really useful for companies or even you, if you're an individual. You can use this to generate some content, summarize some content which has already been written by someone else, and give your own unique perspective into it by modifying the prompt, doing prompt engineering.